Hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Introduction to the Beck Technology Preconstruction Suite. This webinar is brought to you by Live Lab Learning, which is a subsidiary of Academic Core, which is a wholly owned applied software company created to provide world-class training. My name is Rachel Grillo, and I'm happy to be your moderator today. And throughout our presentation, we encourage you to interact with us by typing in questions and comments in the questions pane, and we will be answering questions at the end of this presentation. Go on to the next slide. This webinar is being recorded and will be available to you online on our YouTube channel. We also will send you an email following the webinar with a link to the recording. Next slide, please. And if you haven't already, go ahead and search for Live Lab Learning on Facebook and like our page to receive the latest information and special offers. When you visit our website, livelablearning.com, there is a complete schedule of the upcoming training, so keep an eye out for that. Next slide, please. And following the Q&A at the end of the webinar, we will be giving away a $25 Visa gift card. You must be present to win the gift card, so stay tuned and we'll pick a winner at the end of the webinar. Next slide. Stuart Carroll is our speaker today. He's the COO of Beck Technologies and runs virtually every aspect of the organization. He has been a lead AEC technologist for well over a decade and continually speaks on the integration of cost and scoping technologies to owners and developers. And he serves as a keynote speaker for various trade shows, conferences, and councils, and is an expert on AEC technology and its application in the marketplace. So if you would, please join me in welcoming today's speaker, Stuart Carroll.
All right, good morning everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. For those who haven't met me, I'm originally from the UK. I do say some goofy things every once in a while. I apologize maybe at the end if I say anything that is confusing. By all means ask me to elaborate differently, choose different words. I look forward to lots of Q&A at the end. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on us, but one of the things I want to communicate that is unique is that unlike a lot of software vendors, Beck Technology was founded as part of the Beck Group. The Beck Group is a 100-plus-year-old architecture and construction organization. Beck Tech was founded initially as an internal software development group working alongside the pre-construction personnel of the Beck Group. So a lot of the technology I'm going to show you and talk about today was developed by people that have grown up in the construction space. A lot of the functionality that we have added into our technology and will continue to add into our technology comes from customer requests. It's not all about Beck anymore. We commercialized the entity Beck Technology in 2006. And we've been servicing many of the large construction companies across the US and internationally around the world. One of our key partnerships that we entered into last year was with Applied Software, and I want to thank Applied for giving us the opportunity to present to you this morning. So what I'm going to introduce you to is two products that we have that we call collectively the DESTINI Suite. DESTINI was an acronym that we came up with back in the mid-1990s, and it stands for Design, Estimating, Integration Initiative. Collectively, Profiler and Estimator form our DESTINI Suite. Profiler is our virtual planning offering that is used at the front end of the project when there's traditionally a lot of uncertainty. The uncertainty comes from the owner really not understanding how far their budget will go, combined with they haven't really got a clear direction for design. So what we've seen is there's usually a lot of churn that happens at that phase. There's a design presented to an owner, there's some back and forth between the owner and the architect. At some point, a contractor will be asked for a price. More often than not, that price doesn't line up with the owner's expectations. And we go through these loops where we're changing the design, we're adding a floor, removing a floor, we're changing the skin, we're changing the structural systems to try and get alignment between what the architect is proposing, what the owner wants, and what the owner can afford. So Profiler is the tool that we brought to market in 2006 to address that particular part of the puzzle. At some point, a project team will get an owner to either a go or no-go decision. Assuming that the project moves forward, the outputs from Profiler can form the inputs for our next offering called DESTINI Estimator. DESTINI Estimator can take those outputs as baseline estimates. As the name implies, Estimator is an estimating tool. It enables us to update the estimate based on the information that we have from the design team. And then it enables us to very quickly compare what's changed and why. I mentioned at the beginning a lot of our functionality comes as requests from our customers. Estimator was actually developed in partnership with one of our customers. Sun Construction came to us in 2011, and they were looking for a downstream estimating solution that they could use for target value design. They work with owners to set targets, oftentimes in negotiated work. And then the name of the game is being able to keep a project to that target, delivering a quality product, but delivering it on time and on budget. So Estimator was developed initially with Sun's input. As part of the agreement we have with Sun, we could not commercialize Estimator until last summer. Last summer we took a step back and made the decision that instead of bringing the product to market as it was for Sun, we were going to get input from 12 other construction companies that we've been working with our Profiler product. So a lot of what we have inside Estimator was initially created for Sun, but it's been added to based on input from other construction companies. Collectively, we believe we have a beginning-to-end pre-construction solution that I'm going to go into a little bit more detail in the rest of this presentation. So I mentioned the Beck Technology commercialized in 2006. We have been working primarily on our Profiler side since Profiler has been around, as I said, since 2006, with really two groups of customers. The first group tend to be owners, architects, some developers who will hire Beck Technology to join their team and use our technologies on their behalf. The second group, and it is our largest group of customers, tend to be general contractors or construction managers who will buy and implement our technology and use themselves. So what are our customers looking at our solutions to address? Well, I'm pretty privileged in the role that I'm in, that I get to meet with a lot of our customers and a lot of prospects on a daily basis. And across the board, I tend to hear four major challenges facing pre-construction groups. They're always being asked to assist business development in pursuing work. I always like to say that estimators are busy, whether the economy's strong or the economy's poor. They're busy chasing work when the economy's low, and they're busy executing and helping teams estimate projects that they've won when the economy heats up. But estimators are always involved in the pursuit and winning of work. What we've heard is that the contractors are looking for a differentiator. The differentiator isn't the tool that I'm going to show or the tools that I'm going to show, but it's really what the tool enables you to do. It's our belief that the DESTINI Suite enables you to engage with an owner in a lot deeper and meaningful way than, say, using Excel. It's no longer about just getting to a bottom line number with pre-construction. It's about problem solving. It's about coming up with creative solutions and being transparent with the owner so that they understand that this is a conceptual number or this is a detailed number based on either information that the estimator is making up because it's not in the design documents, based on their past experience, or it's about finding holes in the documents or pieces of the design that are not complete, and communicating that information with the owner and the architect. A lot of our customers are facing the challenge of keeping G&A costs low, so they're trying to do more with less. And estimators work long hours. A lot of our customers would like to spend nights with family and nights with weekends instead of having to pursue work. So these are some of the challenges that we believe our solutions help our customers address. So the first of the products we're going to quickly touch on is our DESTINI Profiler or DProfiler product. The idea behind DProfiler is pretty simple, and that's that instead of starting with an Excel file, we start with a simple 3D model. A lot of our customers have historically used some kind of takeoff tool to take information from whatever the architect is providing them. The leap to creating a model inside Profiler is a pretty easy leap. So, 90+% of our customers have some kind of experience with a takeoff tool, and they're very easily able to get up and create a simple model like the one shown in the lower left-hand corner. A little bit of training, a little bit of pointing in the right direction. The modeling portion of Profiler is pretty straightforward. But the model in the lower left-hand corner may be a 20-minute to a 1-hour kind of model. It's very crude, it's very simple, but through the simplicity, there's a vehicle to have a conversation with the design team and the owner's team. The colors can be used to convey types of construction. So maybe the blue is office, the peach may be retail, the orange may be parking. So we can point and talk to specific things that we're going to estimate. The second thing, we have geometry, we have shapes, we have areas, we have volumes. So from this, we can start to apply our historical rules of thumb based on the areas of the slabs or the departments. We can start to have conversations around assumptions around skin and materials. And ultimately, we can come up with a high-level number, but be able to back it up through conversation and verification with the design and the owner's teams. The graphical model in the middle maybe is a little bit more complicated. It's a large mixed-use type project. There's a lot more construction going on. This may be several million square feet. This may be a couple days of work. The colors on the skin can be used to convey, again, assumptions. So we're not proposing a pink building, but what we are using is the colors to convey our assumptions around mixes of materials. So the pink may be 60% glass, 40% brick. The green may be 80-20. The blue may be 100% glass. But it enables us, again, to point at things and have very specific conversations around assumptions. The model in the lower right-hand corner is probably the most detailed that our customers would get. And quite frankly, if I'm starting to see models that are approaching the visual quality of an architectural model, I get a little concerned. The intent behind Profiler is not to create an architecturally pleasing model. The intent is to put enough information graphically into that model that we can facilitate a conversation. The model in the lower right-hand corner may be a week or so of modeling. The modeling portion of Profiler is not unique. There are other technologies on the market for creating models. What is unique about Profiler is the fact that we can tie whatever the estimator is sketching to whatever the estimator is pricing. So that model may have been created by bringing in some PDFs. It may have been created by importing some information from SketchUp. It may be created by importing a model. It may just be a hand sketch that we took a photograph on our camera and we created that model. But with everything that we sketch, we can associate data. So as the estimator is sketching the floor slab, we can start to use the area, the volume, the perimeter, the thickness as a way of quantifying and estimating our means and methods that we associate costs with. So as we're building the model, we can also start to build and communicate our estimate. Not only can you estimate direct costs, you can also define indirect costs. So there's an indirect fee editor directly inside Profiler and actually inside Estimator. Not only can you model costs, but a lot of times owners are interested in energy efficiency. Maybe they're holding on to this building for the next 50 years. What can we put into the project that would make this building more efficient? LEED is still a big factor in a lot of owners' minds when they're making some of these decisions. Inside Profiler, there is an energy simulator. It's based on the Department of Energy's DOE2 standards. It will calculate things like tonnage and peak electrical loads. As contractors, we can use those tonnages for tying maybe to your historical norms for pricing. So if it comes up with the project requires 300 tons of cooling, you can apply $5,000 per ton, or you can define specific line items, a chiller, a pump, an air handling unit, to match those tonnage requirements. More than that, it also will run an energy simulation over a period of time to give you feedback on what is the operating cost for that particular configuration of the project. If you rotate the building, rerun the analysis, it will show you the delta. Profiler also has a sequencing module. So you can import construction schedule items from Microsoft Excel, Microsoft Project. You can define them directly inside Profiler. You can then map objects that have costs associated with them to those construction activities. And I'll show you this in just a second. You can play visually the construction schedule. But unlike other more detailed sequencing and scheduling tools, at this phase, we're trying to have a conversation with the owner. So this is less about, crane clearances and things of that nature. It's more to do with what's the value to the owner. The value to the owner is you can communicate cash flow. So if the owner is going and borrowing some money, being able to communicate how much money they need to have on hand in order for that project to meet the schedule is vitally important. And our sequencing module will enable you to communicate that. I live in Texas, despite my accent. The world is fairly flat. The rest of the country, that is not the case. You can take a project, $150 a square foot office building, put it on 2 different parcels of land. The land is going to impact the total project cost significantly. So inside Profiler, we have the ability that you can bring in the topography for a proposed project. You can bring in that topo from Google Earth. You can bring it in from a CAD file. And once you've brought in the topography, you can set the elevations of the buildings, the parking, the paving. And as you do that, it's dynamically going to calculate cut and fill quantities for you. So what I thought I would do next is show you a quick little video of all of that in about 2 to 3 minutes. So as I mentioned, there are different ways you can start a project. In this particular example, we're going to go to Google Earth. We're going to find a piece of land, and we're actually going to capture that topography and bring it back into DProfiler. So inside DProfiler, once you've captured the topo, you can look at the topography flattened with contour lines, or you can look at it 3-dimensionally as it would be in the real world. If you have a geotech report and you have the boring logs, you can actually define what are the subsoil materials, how thick are they, how expansive is the material, what's the compaction factor for fill. You can define as many of those boring locations as you have. Once you've defined the borings, you can start to introduce elements into the model. So every time you draw something, Profiler goes into your database and it looks for what costs you've told Profiler to add into the estimate. There are a number of ways you can get data into the estimate. One of the more common ways is through Excel. We also have connections to Sage Timberline. We resell RS means data. More often than not, a lot of our customers will import their own data through that Excel interface. As we start to introduce more elements into the project, the same things are going to happen. We introduce parking. The profiler goes into the database. It looks for your recipe of costs to apply, and it uses the quantities of what you've drawn for quantifying those line items. There are many ways to build projects. What we're going to show you here is what we call the wizard. The wizard, you answer a series of questions. How many floors? What's the size of the floor plate? What's the floor-to-floor height? What's the skin? And then you define where on the site you want that building to go. Profiler will automatically assemble you a building based on that representation. It will pull in your costs from your database, applying your rules of thumb. They'll be shown in the lower right-hand corner. Once you have a model, it's not a static model. You can make changes. So you can copy and paste. You can add floors, remove floors, start to do what-ifs. What if it's steel? What if it's concrete? What if we change the materials on the facade? Not only is Profiler calculating costs, but because we started with the topography and we've defined the elevations of the buildings, we can actually start to use Profiler to calculate our cut and fill quantities. We can look at it visually, where red are areas of cut, blue areas of fill. And then we have tabular data that you can go to look at what were the quantities, what were the costs. For any of these rows in these tables, you can expand the row and you can manipulate the costs. Another feature inside Profiler is this ability to run an energy simulation. So it takes into account the shape and size of the building. It takes into account the weather data based on the zip code that we defined for the project, and it will run energy calculation. In the energy calculation window, it will show you the tonnage and the peak electrical loads. It will go into your database and look for your recipe that you defined to apply towards this 317 tons. It will then calculate, based on this information in the top left-hand corner, a net present value calculation of how much it's going to cost the owner to operate this facility over, in this particular case, 15 years. And then there are charts and pie charts, bar charts to communicate information. If the user goes back and makes a modification, reruns it, you'll obviously get different results. Okay, the last piece in Profiler is the construction sequencing. So more often than not, our customers have built a model and applied costs. They're then looking at how do I communicate the construction sequence. So they're bringing in some kind of Gantt chart. They're creating it in Microsoft Project. They're creating it directly inside Profiler. They're then dragging and dropping components into those activities. And when they drop the component in the activity, Profiler will allow you to define how that object's costs get distributed. Do they hit on the first day of that activity, the last day of that activity, evenly across the duration of that activity, or some kind of bell curve? When you play the construction sequence, it will visually show you what's going on, and then in the top right-hand corner, it will actually communicate the cash flow. So how much money does the owner have to have in order for the project to move forward? Okay, the second product in the suite is DESTINI Estimator. So as I said, this was developed in partnership with Sunt and enhanced through collaboration with 12 other large general contractors. The basic idea behind Estimator was to create a simple, flexible, fully featured estimating platform. If you compare it to other estimating tools, and I'll show you this in just a little bit, it has a lot of estimating functionality, but more than that, it has some very easy to use and easily adopted enhancements. Some of those would be, okay, we heard from our advisory board that having standard out-of-the-box reports for estimators is important. So we have a reporting engine built into the product. But what we heard was oftentimes those reports are not flexible enough to meet the customer's needs. So oftentimes estimators are kicking their estimates out into Excel. They're manipulating the estimate to fit it into their Excel format based on how the owner wants to see things. Unfortunately, once it gets into Excel, they're making changes and it never gets back into the estimating tool. And then you get back into those issues with Excel formulas and things of that nature. So inside Estimator, we have standardized reporting, but we also have an integration with Excel. So what this enables you to do is use your Excel reports for reporting. But because it's dynamically linked with what we have inside the estimate, you can just simply change the estimate and it will change it on your report. We also have the ability to compare multiple estimates. So what we heard from our advisors is the world of construction management, general construction, has changed and is probably going to continue to change. It's not just about getting to a number. It's about working with a design team, working with an owner to communicate what has changed and why over the duration of the project, and then to be proactive in value engineering solutions where we're adding value, not taking away or cost cutting. So inside Estimator, there's some really nice functionality for visual comparisons, and I'll share with you on that. I'm also giving a webinar in the next 2 weeks, and if anybody's interested, they can follow up with Rachel or myself, where we're showing our next generation of Estimator that will be out at the end of this quarter, where we're integrating 2D and 3D takeoff directly into our estimating platform. That's based around an integration with Autodesk's Navisworks, and we'll cover that in a follow-up webinar. All right, I'm going to quickly show you this little video of Estimator. We're going to start by opening an existing estimate. And like I mentioned, you can open these from Profiler, or you can create them from scratch just inside Estimator. The window in the middle contains rows representing the items of cost, and then there are different columns at the top. Some of the columns, like descriptions and unit prices, are system defined. Other columns, like CSI Level 1, Level 2, Master Format Level 1, Level 2, are defined by the user. Any of these columns you can drag up, and you can use them as a way of organizing your estimate. There are some nice functions that you can color code things differently, and then you can store these layouts the way I typically want to look at my estimate, so that over the course of several projects, you can start to look at that data how you're used to seeing it. On the left, we have what's called our filter tree. The filter tree enables you to organize your estimate based on whatever classification scheme you have that you want. And then as you click on nodes within the tree, it's actually going to filter the line items in the estimate window and show you the costs associated with that particular node. So in this particular case, we selected on B30 roofing. So instead of us having $30 million of cost for the entire estimate, we now have $44,000 of cost. This tree is very flexible. So if you have a column in your estimate for a different classification or a different property, you can organize the tree based on those columns. So in this case, we have columns representing buildings. We have columns representing classifications. You can even do things that are project specific. An owner comes in midway through the project and says, hey, we want you to track owner furnished versus GC furnished items. You can add a user defined column, and then for each of your line items, you can say whether it was owner furnished or GC furnished. And then you can organize the tree based on that column and very quickly be able to click on, here are the items that are owner furnished, here are the items that are GC furnished. Just like the layouts, you can name these, so you can very quickly recall filters that you've set up before. So in this case, we can go backwards and forwards between system and master format or unit format. Okay, we also have the ability of embedding your Excel files. So this is what I was mentioning on the last slide. So we have full-blown reporting just like you have in other estimating platforms. But the embedded Excel window at the bottom has some sheets that no matter what workbook you load, Estimator will put data on those sheets. It will put line item data. It will put work breakdown structure data. It will put comparison data. You can set up your Excel workbooks to link to that data. What it enables you to then do is if you change the estimates, your Excel reports will dynamically update to reflect those changes. So a lot of companies already have reports like these. We oftentimes will work with them to hook their reports into this data provided by Estimator. This is a standard report, an element breakdown report. Estimator also has the ability that you can load multiple estimates. So in this case, we've loaded 3 estimates. Estimator doesn't know what those 3 estimates represent. In the particular scenario that I'm showing here, we have a baseline estimate represented by the box on the left, and then 2 VE options, demo alternate 1, demo alternate number 2. You could have loaded the current baseline estimate and loaded where we were at the end of design development versus where we were at the end of schematic design. You could have loaded the current estimate with 2 past projects or 3 past projects or 4 past projects. And what I'm going to show you, it doesn't matter on any of those scenarios. It will just compare estimates. At 50,000 feet, if we're comparing one project against a past project, we may want to adjust for time. We may want to adjust for regionality. So Estimator gives you this ability to globally adjust the estimates. Once you actually have adjusted the estimates, you can start to interrogate the data within the 3 estimates. You can start to look at what were the buildings. So in the scenario I have, in option number 2, alternate number 2, we went from surface to structured parking. There's a very simple way to communicate that was the change that happened between those estimates. We also provide the estimator the ability to enter data that they wish to track. They can use this data inside their estimates when they're creating formulas, or they can just use it as a way of tracking the evolution of some of the major elements within the project. In this particular window, we have the baseline and then the 2 alternates. Anything that's blue is a difference, a delta, against that baseline. We have windows that you can start to look at the direct and the indirect costs. Again, 50,000 feet at this point, but we can start to communicate what were the costs of the three estimates. And then we can start to look at a little bit more granular information. So in this particular case, we can use the columns that are in the 3 estimates. In this case, the 16 division breakdown. It could have been the 50 division. It could have been uniform. It could have been that owner furnished versus GC furnished example that I gave. But what it will do is it will line up the 3 estimates in however we're looking at the data, and it will show me the differences. So in this particular scenario, Division 3 concrete jumps significantly on option number 3. Well, I know that we added in a huge structured parking deck. That kind of makes sense. Over here, however, on Division 12, it looks like there's an oops. We have a big amount in our baseline, but it seems to have gone away in our 2 options. It's a great QA/QC tool, even at this level, just to see what changed and why. The next thing you can do is you can actually start to drill down and look at the comparisons visually. So you can drag out whatever columns you want to group the estimates by. So in this case, we're looking at level 1 CSI and level 2 CSI. If we get rid of the column, it will just collapse the estimate into the 1 through 16. The colors represent deltas against the baseline. So green is the dark green is a large positive variance. Dark red is a large negative variance. Colors in between are positive or negative variances, but in lesser degrees. We also have 2 ways of color coding. Percentage change to the baseline for sort of fine-tuning of the estimates, and then by total impact on the overall budget, so by cost, which is where a lot of our customers will start. We can then start to go into more details. So this particular window will show you every line item across the 3 estimates, and it will show you which properties within those estimates are impacting those changes. So as we scroll down, again, you'll see dark reds, dark greens, light reds, light greens. The areas that are dark red negatively impact our estimate. Those are probably the place we go to first. Positive dark green are other areas that we would go to first when communicating the story. We heard a story from a customer who had a project where they were using this, and they did a traditional variance report where they were looking at totals. And in their baseline compared to their third estimate, there was no variance. When they ran the variances inside Estimator and they looked a little bit more detailed, what they actually found was interesting. And that is, in the baseline, they noticed that as a percentage of the total cost of the project, their curtain wall line item was a big factor. So they sort of went into problem-solving mode, and they teamed the curtain wall manufacturer with the precaster and came up with creative ways, putting the embeds in the precast panel, of reducing the unit price. So in their second estimate, the unit price went down. In the third estimate, the quantity of curtain wall went up. Not saying that either one was good or bad, but there was 2 opportunities to have a conversation with the architect and the owner. One was this to be a high design element, and do you want it on more of the project? The other is this an area that we could save some money and apply that money to other areas of the project? These comparisons are also linked back to that Excel dashboard. So we can very quickly present to an owner multiple alternatives very quickly. So the images came from Profiler. In this particular case, the 3 estimates came from Profiler. We then moved them into Estimator, and we're using the comparative analysis functionality of Estimator tied in with a dashboard in Excel to communicate what changed and why. So at the top there's an image, in the middle there's some of that data the estimator was tracking, and then at the bottom we have our costs, our fees. All right. Last month, just before Christmas, Sunt Construction, Brian Parker gave a presentation, and he presented a couple of case studies on how Sunt had utilized the DESTINI Suite to work on negotiated projects where they lock in a number based on a whole series of assumptions, and then use Estimator to manage the design and the buyout of the project to hold the project to those initial numbers. Instead of me going through those, I'd point your attention to the link at the top of this slide and invite you to go to our YouTube channel where you can click on Brian Parker's presentation. Brian also talks a little bit, and there's other presentations by Sunt that articulate the same thing, which is how did they get going? How do you make that transition from one platform to another? Over the course of a year, Sunt went from no users of Estimator to all of their estimators, 40, 50 estimators, using DESTINI Estimator and DESTINI Profiler. Again, if you're interested in how they made that transition, there's video testimonials. If you want to talk to Sunt, reach out to me, reach out to Rachel, and we may be able to facilitate a conversation with them. So with that, I'm going to open it up for any questions, and Rachel will no doubt read those to me.
All right. The first question we have is, can you apply the color system to the different area of work?
You can.
This was asked around 12:45.
Yeah, you can. So all of the color coding that you have in I'm assuming the question's about Profiler. All of the color coding in Profiler is user-defined. So for any of those construction activities that you have inside that Gantt chart, you can define a color. For any object in the model, you can define a color. And then if you're playing the construction sequence, you can say whether you highlight the object color or the construction activities color. You can do them by area of work. You can do them by, if you're a construction manager and there are multiple GCs, you could do it by color-coded by GC. So there are definitely multiple ways that you can color-code by area of work.
Awesome. Yeah, one more question. Is there an ability in Estimator to have LMES unit costs, or is it limited to a total unit cost item?
No. So inside, there was actually, okay, so I'm going to answer it in a little bit of a long-winded way, but I promise I'll get to the answer. So we launched version 1 of Estimator with just unit prices. We heard from a lot of self-performed contractors and obviously subcontractors that that's not how they estimate. They define their labor and material rates based on resources. Those resources can be crew members that make up a crew, or it can be equipment that goes into a crew, or it can be just plain Jane equipment. So inside Estimator and Profiler, you can define labor rates, material rates based off of resources that you group to form a crew. You can apply the crew to an item of cost and define a production rate, and even define rate tables that you can take a standard crew in one region and apply to a different region where it will escalate, say, taxes or wage escalation from one region to another. So you can definitely define unit prices at a very granular level and not just on a unit price basis. And the version that where I was going with the original part was that version was released just before Christmas. So in the current commercially available offering of Estimator, that's in there. Any others, Rachel?
No, actually, we just had those two.
Well, let me
go ahead.
Yeah, just to remind everyone, I said this kind of in the presentation, but we have a version that's going to be released at the end of this upcoming quarter. So end of March, beginning of April, there will be another release of Estimator. That release will integrate 2D and 3D takeoff. What we've heard, a lot of companies are happy with their 2D takeoff solutions. However, when they take a step back and they look at, we do a takeoff in whatever our flavor of takeoff is, and then we copy that typically either directly into our estimating tool or into Excel. If it goes into Excel, we manipulate the number and then we copy it again. Well, every time you copy and paste, you introduce an opportunity for error. So by integrating our takeoff into the estimating tool, we don't have that copy-paste. You can simply define a takeoff, an area, a line, a count. You can define conditions. You can define parametrics. So I draw a line, and parametrically I want a surface area because that line represents a wall, so I define that that wall is 9 feet tall. You can define all of those. And then you can drag and drop those properties over your items in your estimate to quantify your estimate. If you then go back at any point in the future and click either on the graphic representing the takeoff or clicking on the item in the estimate, it will highlight either the costs or the graphic associated with that item of cost. The second thing that we heard was 2D's here to stay, it's not going away, but people are starting to see more 3D. They're starting to see BIM. The challenge for estimators is, how do estimators utilize BIM? They don't want to get hung up in all of this powerful Revit technology. They don't, their role is to get the quantity, clarify it, make sure that we understand what's missing, backfill, and ultimately be creative about how we can come up with solutions to meet the owner's budget. So the challenge is, how do you get BIM to the estimator? Well, one of the things that we've tried doing is developing Estimator with the estimator in mind. So instead of taking a BIM tool and trying to massage it into an estimating tool, we've developed ground up a tool for estimators. That's our primary focus. The same approach with 2D, where you drag and drop, we've got for our 3D. So you can open up a 3D model, select all the walls. Maybe one of the walls is coded wrong. We'll recode the wall. Color code them. Put them into buckets that you're comfortable with. And then drag and drop the quantities that you're interested in to drive your estimate into the estimate. If you click on an assembly, it will show you the graphics driving the quantities in the assembly. If you click on a line item, it will show you the graphics driving the quantification of that line item. If I click on an object in the model, it will show me all the costs associated with that object in the model. It will also give you the ability to update the models. Well, instead of it just changing your estimate wholesale, it gives you the ability to review those changes so that you, the estimator, are always in control. That functionality is coming at the end of March, beginning of April. And like I said, I'll be doing a webinar in the next couple of weeks. If anybody's interested to take a sneak peek preview of what's coming, reach out to Rachel, reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to show you that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, as promised, we have our gift card giveaway towards the end of our webinar today. Mr. Michael Hoppel, if you are still with us, please type your name in the chat box and we'll get with you afterwards. And I think that's about it. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. Oh, I see you. Thank you, Michael. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. We hope you found this webinar informative and helpful to your business. And we look forward to seeing you guys on a future webinar. Thank you so much.